From Bosstrack, it's Her HypeSquad, a show about amazing women who've made incredible strides as leaders in their industry. They're here to support you and your leadership growth, to encourage you and hype you up as part of your Hype Squad. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Her Hype Squad with Bosstrack. I'm your host, Michelle Harris. Today, I'm talking with Melissa Park, an award-winning global event producer and founder of Melissa Park Events and the Mel-Factor Method. Melissa and I talk about building leadership credibility, using your network for success, the importance of asking questions, and the time she met Sir Richard Branson. Before we get into our conversation, let me tell you about Melissa. Melissa Park, also known as Mel, is an award-winning global event producer who has utilized her engaging personality, unending energy, and attention to logistical and design details to build a business that is recognized across the US and Australia. After producing high-profile business and consumer events, Melissa broke out on her own and launched her first event management company in Australia at the age of 26. She produced events like HSBC Bank's Chinese New Year Gala dinner tour and more than 20 outdoor festivals attracting 20,000 to 100,000 attendees. She also served as a stage manager for notable events like the Sydney Olympic Games 10-year anniversary ceremony, Sydney International FIFA Fan Fest, and the Major League Baseball opening series in 2014. Melissa moved to the U.S. in 2014, where she began working internally for 2 years at Hortonworks, and 2 years later stepped back out on her own with Melissa Park Events, specializing in elevating brands, amplifying corporate messages, and transforming struggling events into extraordinary must-attend experiences. She's made a name for herself in the technology space for her seamlessly executed large-scale user conferences, strategic sponsorships, and innovative brand activations. Her client list has grown from one continent to another based on referrals, recognition from attendees on site, and clients who return year after year for her to produce their events. She currently splits her time between New York and Sydney when she's not traveling to produce her nearly 30 annual events. Her events have been featured on many TV and radio programs in Australia, and she's the creator of the Mel-Factor Method Masterclass, a contributing writer to numerous publications, and a sought-after keynote speaker and panelist. I'm so excited to bring you my conversation with Melissa Park. Hi, Melissa. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Hype Squad with Bosstrack. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing some of your leadership experience with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We provided an intro before we got started, but I'd love for them to hear in your own words a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Melissa. I'm a global event producer. I've been doing it for 21 years now, which is a little insane to think about. I just turned the big 4-0 in June. So, now 40 and fabulous. I currently live in Sydney, but spend a lot of my time in the US. I was living in the US from 2014 to 2020 and then moved home during COVID. Now that events are back, I think the first half of the year spent like 16 weeks out of the first half of the year in the US. So we'll see if I move on back over. But besides that, let me see, most of my time honestly is spent working, which I love, and I get to travel all over the world doing that, which is one of my biggest hobbies. And when I'm not working, I love spending time with my family, catching up with friends, and going to shows and concerts and doing all those fun things. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was wondering if you were in Australia or if you were still in New York, so that explains that.
Yes, go between. You could get me in 1 week in Sydney, and then the next I could be in any city in the US. So
oh wow, that's exciting. That's very exciting. So I know you're in event planning. So I'm wondering how you got interested in event planning.
So I kind of fell into it somewhat, but I was born for it. I'm convinced of that. So when I was at school, event planning wasn't really kind of a thing. Obviously it was happening. I didn't know about it. So I went the marketing business route coming out of school because that was the blend of kind of the business side and the creative, which is what I was after. And then I was working at kind of an admin role and was told about a position at a division of general practice that was managing or marketing and organising their events. So it was all about doctors' education. And went for that role and got it. And then, I knew instantly the minute I started coordinating their events, and I'm like, oh my God, this is epic. I love this. So that's kind of fell into it that way. And then went and got my diploma from TAFE after that for event planning. I'd already been kind of done the higher education on marketing and business, but I always like to have the piece of paper to go with the experience. So kind of, fell into it. But, I was writing run sheets. This is like a fun fact. But I was writing run sheets when I was in kindergarten. Obviously didn't know what they were. This could be my OCD, but I had a little notepad that was next to my bed, and I would write every night the same thing, like 7 o'clock, wake up, 7:02, brush teeth, 7:05, make sandwiches. And it would kind of guide me for the morning plan before going to school when I was like 5 or 6. So, I've been writing run sheets since then. So I think I was kind of born for this.
I love that. I had never heard that term, run sheets, but I understand what it's so interesting. It sounds a little bit like you were doing time blocking in kindergarten.
Yeah. Which I think speaks volumes for who I am today.
And so I know you are out on your own now. What led you to start Melissa Park Events?
So I think I've always been entrepreneurial. So I think it was a given that I would go out and, start a business at some point in my life. What actually kind of led me at the exact point in time that I did it, which was in 2008 when I was 26, I was working for a company and I was there. The title was long, like events, new business and marketing director. And I'd secured them like quite a few really good gigs to perform at. And the company was based around one person. That was the main product. It was a performance-based company. And I'd secured these gigs, and the main performer, just kept messing up, and in the fact, he just didn't care. I would secure a really cool corporate event and he just wouldn't show because he didn't feel like it. Or, I'd secured something that should have kind of got them so much corporate business throughout the year, and they just messed around when they got there, and the performance was terrible. It was cringeworthy to watch. And I just kind of thought, I'm working so hard, and if I'm killing myself for anyone, it's going to be me after watching that. And I'm just like, I am done with this. So when I returned from that particular trip, I resigned that day, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm working, around the clock for your business, and I'm putting everything into it and securing the most incredible opportunities, and they're just not being taken advantage of. So at that point I was just like, I'm going to go and work this hard on something for me and see what happens. And luckily it worked out pretty well.
Great. So did you already have clients lined up in your mind that you were going to have business coming in, or did you launch without having any knowledge of who your customer is going to be?
Yeah, I launched with no knowledge. What I did know was I had a great network built up in Australia. So the way in which I did it was send an email out to everyone that I had worked with in the past, and just said hey, I'm going out on my own. If you happen to hear of anyone, any organization or person that needs an event producer or needs to outsource any aspect of event management, I would love it if you could refer me. And that one email did the trick, and then the referrals started coming in and requests to do work, and then it kind of built from there. Often if I am on site doing an event, I will have people come up to us and say hey, this is awesome, we want to book you for ours, can we jump on the phone next week? So it kind of built organically through that, but the first thing was just through a network. And I think it comes down to, I'm very thankful that my parents instilled a really good work ethic in myself and my brother. And, I've been able to build a very successful company in Australia. And then when I moved to the US, I did the exact same thing with the network. I moved with no contacts at all. And then, got an in-house role, and then kind of, showcased what I could do, and then did the exact same thing when I went out on my own over in the US as well. So, it's a formula that works, but I've worked hard to get to where I am, and be in a position where it can be a referral based business and we can be extremely busy.
Yeah. So I love that. Very brave, but very confident in starting a business like that. So I understand you do a lot of tech or events for the tech field. But before, when you were in an organization, not working for yourself, you were working with big companies like FIFA and Sydney Olympics. Like, what made you decide to go to tech?
So I didn't go to tech straight away. So I guess there's two versions of Melissa Park events. So the Australian one, which was 2008 till 2015. For that, I was very intentional about not pigeonholing myself into one type of event or type of client. So for when I had the Australian business, we would do everything from like conferences, gala dinners, a ton of cultural festivals and outdoor events. It was a very broad portfolio, and that was for corporate, government, and community clients. So that was very broad. When I moved to the US, I happened to take an in-house role first, which was for a tech company. So for them, I was their director of global events, and I produced their global conferences around the world for 2 years in-house. And then after that, I kind of got to the point where I wanted to go back out on my own. So it just so happened that with that in-house role, my entire network then was, all of my kind of former colleagues that had now moved on to other organizations. So as I mentioned before, I kind of just put the word out to all of them that had attended my events or worked with me very closely, and just said like, hey, I'm going out on my own. If your new workplaces need anything, or if you hear of anyone needing any to outsource any portion of their events, I'd love it if you could recommend me or share my contact details. So it just kind of like so happened because of my network over in the US.
Okay. Yeah, networking is so important. Just starting a business, but also when you're in just the corporate world, just trying to make your way.
It really is. And I say that it was so crazy of me when I decided in the August of 2014, after having a little internal war with myself for 3 years, that I was going to go to the US and try and make it over in that market. And as I mentioned earlier, I knew no one over there. So I booked a one-way ticket, and I was like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I spent, I would say, the first 5 months, my full-time job was applying for jobs because I knew no one. And then randomly I met a girl on a hike, and she's like, oh, what's your story? What are you doing? And I told her, and I'm just like, I just can't find anything. I'm applying via all these sites all day, every day. And she's like, my workplace has 2 roles. Why don't you send me your CV?
Oh, wow.
And instantly, the next day, I had a phone call from the company, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So now my advice to anyone is, if you're thinking of making a crazy move, build your network first, because it's going to open all the doors. Mine was a slightly different experience, but hey, it's character building.
Yes, definitely. I love it. And the Mel-Factor, I'd love to hear about that. I know it's something highlighted on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a funny one, because I always feel very self-promotion-y doing it. And I'm like, but I would kind of say, well, the way I would describe it, and then I'll give you an example. So, when you're watching one of those shows, like the talent shows, like X Factor or America's Got Talent or any of those ones, American Idol, whatever it may be, and you see someone on stage, and you can't quite pinpoint what it is, but there's something special. And so I started with saying it's like that. And then I would get text messages from people that were at one of my former colleagues and they were at one of my an event that they didn't know I was producing, and they're just like, "Hey, are you producing this event? I'm here, and it has the Mel-Factor." And they would, I guess, identify something within an event. I'm like, so then I said to them, "What do you mean by that?" And they always said to me, which is something that I know is a selling point for me, most people they're either really good at logistics or really good at the creative. And I blend the both, and I am really good at both. So it's kind of that cross-section of where it meets, and it's a kind of seamless, very attendee-focused experience, but super fun and creative. But at the essence of it, it always meets my clients' objectives. And that's kind of how I plan an event. So for my clients, I would be like, what do you want to get out of it? What are you hoping to achieve? And then I kind of like really get into the head of the target audience and work out how I can creatively speak to them and give them, an experience they will never forget while still achieving the client objectives. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's kind of what the Mel-Factor is.
Yeah, and then it looks like you've bundled into a program and you teach other people the Mel-Factor. I'm curious, like who is your target audience for that and who ends up taking it?
Yeah, so really the Mel-Factor method came out of, for years I was working with clients and they would struggle to drive attendance to their events. So often they would hire me for the event producer side, and then I would just watch them struggle with the marketing side. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like just the simplest mistakes, like over and over and over again. And I would just watch and cringe. And then I would end up being like, can I help? Like, please, can I help? Send me this, send me that, send me the emails. Like, let me help you with this. And like every single client was just struggling with it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? And I would just find myself like just delving into that area. So what I did was during COVID, when live events obviously were gone for a period of time, I thought like, okay, well, what can I do? I wasn't really into virtual events. So I was like, well, I don't want to dive, like this time period is hard enough. I don't want to dive into something that I'm not passionate about. So instead I sat and created a course and kind of put into words and into, videos and things like that, kind of everything that I typically walk a client through to help them fix their marketing, and just kind of created that. So that was my COVID project. And really it's for everyone. They like within the course is all of my templates, there's checklists, there's like all the things that they get in each module. And it literally walks them through the steps and I say often it's like one of those bow and arrows. Like so often with events, the client will be like, oh, I want to do this part and jump into the fun stuff. But they've got to do the boring stuff first to give it a strong foundation. So you've got to sit down and, what is your mission statement? And, I've got examples there of, how to write a good one, what needs to be included, what are the goals and objectives? Like you need to do all that stuff that, it is somewhat boring. It's a beige task, but you've got to do all of that to like, I pull them back to propel them forward. That's kind of how I explain it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to follow up with you after this at some point because we started in-person events with Bosstrack. And I think the first one went pretty well, but I think it was maybe a little bit by luck and not necessarily because we had a great plan in place. So I'll have to figure out what that method is.
Reach out. I can definitely help.
Great. Thank you. So a lot of people are going to be listening, and even for those that are watching us on video, they can't necessarily see how petite you are. And from what I understand, the event planning industry is pretty male dominated. So I'm wondering, how do you get beyond your being petite and get everybody to do what you need them to do?
So it's funny you asked that, and it's something I honestly feel like I've never really struggled with, which is odd because like in this day and age, like there's so many stories where people have. I think I'm very good at what I do. I know that. Not to say like I also don't want to sound like I'm stuck up or whatever, because in addition to that, I also know that I can't know everything and I don't know everything. So for me, I will, I know what I bring to the table, and I bring a lot of creative ideas and, a lot of seamless processes that I know work. And then I will always ask questions and surround myself with, the very best of vendors. And I'll say to them like, hey, here's a vision. It's not my area, it's a vision, but it's not my area of expertise. Like, how can we bring this to life? And I just know that, it's always bigger than me, but I'm confident in what I'm suggesting because I've been doing it for 21 years. I know what works and what doesn't. And if people want to, listen to it and take advantage of that, great. If they don't, then that's fine too. But essentially their event is not going to go as well. And I know that. I think I'm also very lucky in that, I've built the two businesses based on referrals. So people know what they're getting and they seek me out to help solve their problem. So I think that also makes a difference as well, in that they know something's not working in their event, or there's an issue, or they need to transform it, or whatever the case may be. And they're coming to me because they know I can help them do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just something. And you know what? The other thing is, like, if I sense someone's like dominating or whatever, or, you know, speaking down to me or whatever the case may be, like, I'll call them out. Like, I'm not afraid to just be like, hey, like, not on. You want to work on this with me, then that's fine. But, you know, whatever you just said, that's not going to roll here.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid when I need to call someone out. And I think that, you know, very quickly, once you do that, they know, like, oh, we can't push this one over. Yeah. So I don't know whether it's that. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure what it is, but it's something, and maybe I've just overlooked it. That could quite possibly be the case as well. But it's something that I don't personally feel like I've ever really struggled with.
That's great. I'm actually a petite person myself. I'm only 5'1", and
Oh, we're the
so
same height.
yeah. But it has, like, I've definitely noticed as I was coming up as a leader. I don't think I always ignored it, although I could ignore it, but I was always looked very young for my age too. So that I think was more the challenge than being short, or I'm sure it was the combination of it. So yeah, you really do have to kind of develop a strategy. I can understand, like, when you're going in, they're asking for you and they know what you can do. Like, but when you're, I guess, in a corporate environment, and I'm sure you remember when you were there and you didn't necessarily have that when you're meeting new people, you know, you have that initial, until you start speaking, they have, you know, you can see that look of doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it now. And I think it's also like what environments you put yourself in, right? Like, if I walk into a meeting and I'm feeling uneasy, or I'm feeling like that, then they're probably not the right client or, you know, organization for me to work with.
Yeah.
Because they're probably not going to be receptive to my ideas and all the things that I would bring to the table to transform their event, or, you know, whatever I've been hired to do. But I think for the most part, I don't know. I think maybe it's that they also see that I'm kind of a sponge and I'll ask all the questions, and they might like that side of things, or just this, you know, the suggestions that I might bring up in the space. Maybe if there were any doubts, they're quickly not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I did have the same thing in that I do look young as well for my age. So yeah, I'm just trying to think, or put myself in their shoes, kind of on the spot here, thinking about it. And I'm not sure. Maybe, like, my first role was at a company called Reed Exhibitions, and the coordinators were all kind of young. So I think that was normal. But then the management there was very encouraging and mentoring, and they really let us own our shows. So, you know, if that was my first experience, like big experience in events, or I would say like the first big role after the division of general practice that I worked at. So it was a really, really nice environment to learn in. And then I guess I've just kind of like taken it from there, and then I built my own like self-confidence. And then now that's what I kind of bring to the table.
What would you like? A lot of the women listening to us are maybe more corporate leaders. They're younger. They might maybe starting out as a leader, and they really want to position themselves to be heard. Are there any recommendations that you would give to them to have their voices be heard when they're in a meeting or talking to an authority figure?
Yeah, I think saying less is best, I think, for sure. And then, you know, picking where you will inject yourself so you have the most impact in the shortest amount of time. And then knowing that, you know, I probably didn't do such a good job of this when I was younger, but as you get older, you learn, like, everyone's different. So, you know, what I do with, or how I interact with one client will be different, or, you know, the in-house lead will be very different to how I'll interact with another. So kind of like really observing behaviors and working out, like, what's the best way to resonate with someone individually. I think goes a long way. And I've certainly learned that more and more over the past few years. And now, like, I love studying behaviors and working out like how to interact with each person to get, the most out of them. But less is best. I think and I've rambled to answer this, but
no, it's perfect. Thank you.
But and then also, like, I think, really educate yourself and really ask a gazillion questions to the point where you're annoying to all of your vendors to learn as much as you can, because that's where you can really contribute the most. And then always, like, if you don't know something, like, don't be afraid to put your hand up and just be like, hang on, can you repeat that? Or can you explain that a different way? I don't get it. And I do all of those things, and I like to think I'm respected in the industry, and asking a question doesn't make you dumb. It educates you so you know more.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. And so if I kind of translate that to somebody that's not necessarily working with vendors, but if they're in an environment where they're in taking over a leadership role, it's still important to ask all the questions. I mean, I agree. No question is a stupid one. It's if you continually ask the same question over and over, then that might be a problem. But yeah, I agree. Definitely great advice to do that.
Yeah. And then also, because you would hope that you're hiring like experts in each space, right? Mm-hmm. So, you always hire, or hopefully always hire, for your weaknesses. So they're going to know more about that specific little portion of the role you're managing or overseeing, or the department you're overseeing. So, they can be a source, or they should be a source of education for you to go and have those brainstorming sessions and really, like, solve whatever problems you've got. And, I always go back to, you can't be an expert on everything. You can't be.
Yeah, true. Very true. So I'm curious with, you have to secure the headline events, and there has to be some interesting stories there. I know you mentioned there were times when you would schedule headline events and they wouldn't show up, but do you have any interesting or fun stories you could share with the audience about that experience?
So I have two. One's a good one and one's a bad one. So I would say a keynote speaker that I secured, and there's kind of stories behind both. So there's a keynote speaker I secured. I had always wanted to have Sir Richard Branson at one of my events. And I always wanted to meet him. He was just like, to me, he was like top of my list. Yeah. And then I was working for a tech client in the US, producing their user conference for them. And just so happened that the CEO's mentor from afar was Sir Richard Branson. So I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. This is when it's going to happen. So I had my budget for the event, and I was working with the client, or the in-house overall manager of the event, really trusted me with it. So he was just like, here's the budget, this is what we want to do, now run with it. So I'm not sure if you know how, like, securing headline entertainment works, but I didn't want to tell them what I was doing because I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up. Mm-hmm. So I worked with the Speakers Bureau, and you have to, like, submit this whole big thing. It's not just like book someone and it's that easy when they're of that caliber. They want to make sure that it's a right fit for them as well. So put this whole big thing together, and you have to sign on the dotted line that if they accept it, you're contracted straight away. So it was like a $450,000 fee at the time. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I think this is the right thing to do, but it's a risk worth taking. So I didn't tell a soul, filled in this thing. And then I was going back and forth with the Speaker Bureau. I knew it fit within the budget, but like, it was a huge portion of the budget.
Right.
So filled in this thing, submitted it, and then we got him. And then I'm like, oh my God, now I have to tell the client that I've secured. I'm like, I'm either going to be the best producer in the world, or they're going to fire me. Like, it's going to go one of two ways here. Fortunately, it was the first. So they were like over the moon happy. And then he was everything I dreamed of and more at the event. So it all worked out well. But, that was a very big risk that I took on that one to secure there.
Did you get a chance to talk to him directly?
Yes. Yes, I did. I was in my element. We did like a photo opportunity, and I got to speak to him. And he's like the loveliest man of like, he didn't need to, who am I at the end of the day? But he didn't need to remember. But at the end, he was just like, thank you so much, Melissa. This has been amazing. And like, he remembered my name.
Yeah.
maybe people whispered on the way, I don't know, but it was like so nice. And so like he did not have to do that, and he just made me feel valued. And I'm just like, oh, this is Sir Richard Branson, but it's probably the exact reason why he's made it to where he is. So yeah, so that was incredible. And then there was another, this is a horror story. I was planning a different tech conference in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was like 4,000 to 5,000 person, multi-day conference, again in the tech space. And I wanted an opening act that was just completely different and would knock them off their seat. So I'd arranged or booked this electric violinist group, and I had them performing to like AC/DC and kind of like just the complete contradiction. So I had hired them, and they came, and I hired them off a YouTube video. So I saw them perform and then reached out to their agent. And what happened was the people that were performing in the video were not who they sent.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right. So this is a thing, and I didn't realize this. So when they came for rehearsals, I very quickly realized this was not the same caliber of act. And I'm like, absolutely not. And I actually removed one of the performers off and just said, like, you need to go and practice and then come back and show me what you can do, because I'm very sorry, but you can't go to stage. It was just awful to watch. It was just beyond. So they went and practiced and then came back. And yeah, essentially we went to show with one less performer that came. But what actually happened was they refused to let my tech team manage their AV. So they sent an AV tech that was managing everything off his iPad. So during rehearsal, he had got all of his levels right and everything. And this was an expensive. This was not kind of like just someone I picked off the street. This was an expensive professional proper act, right? And this guy rebooted his iPad just before they went on stage, which meant he lost everything, all of the levels that he had got perfect during the rehearsal. So what the performers got in their ear was squealing the whole show, and what the audience got was squealing. What I got was a heart attack. And the thing was, we just kind of had to watch it play out, because my AV team wasn't controlling the audio, so they couldn't fix it. So many lessons in that. Number one, or I always now say, I want these performers, or you send me a video of the performers I'm getting before I sign a contract. Number two, I don't care who they are, I will never let an AXE tech run the audio. Always my tech's going to. And then I think now, if I were to play that back because there were two segments of the performance, but literally we were just watching in horror, and I probably would have like somehow tried to like get it off and get the MC back on, but it was all happening and we were watching, and I'm just like, this is a train wreck. Like this could not have gone worse. So yeah, horror story and great story, but that's kind of like I guess the two ends of the spectrum of booking headline entertainment.
I can't even imagine just standing there watching it happen and not being able to do anything.
It was the worst. It will never happen again. But but yeah, it was so bad.
So I'd like to switch over a little bit in terms of like your any kind of mentors. Do you have anybody that you value their advice as you were coming up in the event industry that you consider to be a mentor?
Yeah. So I guess, and I'm pausing and kind of, it's a little scary to say who it was because of cancel culture now. And now I'm like, oh God, do I still use this name? I'm not sure. But in the spirit of honesty, because I'm very honest and transparent, for me, for years and years, it was a person called Rachel Hollis. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. And, the last few years, there's been some things go down. But true story, when it was 2007, and I was, in my parents' garage, trying to launch planning to launch my first company, I searched for American event producers, someone that had done it before, American female event producers. And I discovered Rachel, who at that point was like a lifestyle blogger. And just something about her just grabbed me. And she was always like a couple of steps ahead and was just doing like incredible things and kind of was like the vision of what I wanted to be or where I wanted to go. And it's very weird that as time has passed, we've somewhat evolved. She's always a few steps ahead, but we've somewhat evolved in the same way, in that my end goal is to produce my own personal development conferences. Now, when my business took off, I somewhat not stopped following, but kind of was too busy to kind of follow, every minute of her day. And then when I was, so years later, I think, so it would have been 2016 or 17, when I was in the US and I was thinking like, I think I'm going to go back out on my own. And I was like, I pulled out my old notes that I took from Australia to the US with me, with all like people to watch and all those things. And I kind of looked her up. I'm like, I wonder what she's doing now. And she had her own personal development conference. She's written 6 books. She'd done all these things. And I actually went to a conference of hers in LA, I think in 2017, and met her. And it was just phenomenal that like I watched her and kind of like, she's always a few steps ahead, but just someone to watch. Of late, yes, there's been a few not so wonderful things, but back in the day, she was the person that I really looked up to in terms of like business and what she'd done and the brand that she'd built.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you mentioned you wanted to start personal development conferences. Do you do your own conferences?
I do not. That's my that's the current end goal.
So nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I've right now I'm just doing conferences for all of my clients, but I'm very much into personal development. I love it. I eat it up. And my end goal is to produce my own conference. I think I know what I want it to look like, and I know it's going to take me a minute to get there, which is probably why I haven't done it, because all my time goes on my client events. But yeah, that is something that I definitely want to do. And then writing a book in the same space is something that is on my list as well.
Oh, great! So we're getting a little preview of what's to come here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then leadership. What leadership advice have you received that you consider the best advice you've ever received?
I would say pick your battles. And then when you pick one, go all in. So back in I've always been very, very passionate about what I do. And then way back when, I think this was like maybe like 2006 or something. I was working as a contractor in a special events company. And my client had said, we were working on one of their clients' events, and my client said to me, like, you care too much. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I care too much. That's not even a thing. Like, you should be thanking me. And he said, no. He goes, you care much more than the client, and you need to work out what to care about. And that was like, it was eye-opening to me, but something that now, like, that comment always sticks with me, and I understand it now, because I was probably causing more pain than good, because I would see something not be done the way I would do it, but in my younger mind, it was like the proper way, or like do it properly. And so I would just be like, no, we need, like, that's not the best way. Like, we should do this. And yes, it might have been better, but at the end of the day, what we delivered was also great. And ticked the boxes and served the purpose. So I think that there is key as well for like teamwork. Like, sometimes you hire someone in, or a vendor's got their own way of doing things, and it might not necessarily be the way that you do it, but it still gets the job done. And it's, I guess, learning to let go a little bit, which is hard when it's like, Melissa Park Events, it's my name, I'm there, we're hired for me. But letting go a little bit, and then picking your battles, I think are big things that I've certainly learned. And I would say I'm good at it now, but it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, I can see that. And that is great advice. And it's great advice if you're part of a team just working in an office and you're not doing, putting on events, because I've seen it happen where somebody just gets so focused on something that, of course, it's not right, but it's really not important. And then, their time is better spent on things that are more productive and I love that advice. So I'd love to move over to mental well-being. With Bosstrack, we really like to consider the whole leader, and it's not just about you being a leader. It's about you taking care of yourself so you can be the best leader you can be. So I'd love it if you could provide some insight into any routines that you have, morning routines, evening routines, that you attribute your well-being to.
Yeah. So I have suffered with burnout twice, and that's probably honestly an episode in its own. So I won't delve too much deeper into that because I could go on forever. But what I learned from that was boundaries are the biggest and most important thing ever. For me, checklists kind of keep me sane. And exercise. And as for like, I'm not, I'm constantly all over the world. So I'm not like a 5 a.m. club person. That just doesn't work for what I do. So often my wake up time is based on my first meeting. So like they may be at 2 a.m., they may be at 5 a.m. It might be, midnight that I'm on calls. It just depends on, the client's time zone that we're working with. So I wouldn't say that I have so much of a morning routine, but getting my exercise in at some point toward the earlier part of the day is super important to me, and really just kind of like clears my mind, gets the stress out, and enables me to kind of like think clearly, and really just dive into work when I get back. So I would say, yeah, boundaries are the biggest thing. And I'm very firm with them. And then, yeah, exercise and checklists, I think, are a big thing. I love to highlight something off a list.
Yes, it makes you feel so good. It's like this, hit of dopamine.
Exactly.
So, wow, with all those different hours where you're getting up, this question might be even more relevant. But are there any songs that you really enjoy that really get you pumped up when you need to feel a boost of energy or confidence?
I've got a playlist of songs that kind of do the trick. But I would say, and this is like a weird one, and it's not like a Who Run the World or any of those things, but Working Class Man by Jimmy Barnes. You may not have even, it's like a rock classic. You may not have even heard of it. But when I was younger, like in my maybe early teens even, I was dancing at a football grand final. And because I'm so short, I led the hundreds of dancers out. So I led us out of the tunnel onto the field, and it was very likely because of Jimmy Barnes performing that the crowd erupted. But it just so happened that it was when we came out too. So I kind of felt like, oh, it's for us. And then, I danced my heart out on that, that football field for that song. And it kind of just brings me back to the feeling of, 80,000 people in an arena screaming for you. Well, it wasn't for me, let's be real, but, it felt like it. And, just going out and performing with the biggest smile on my face and doing my thing, and the confidence that I had doing that. So that song kind of takes me back to a moment that embodies who I want to be each day. So that kind of like, if I need that hit, that's the song I go to. But if I just need like a pop song, then, I have a playlist full of them that I can just like click through to the one that hits in the moment. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna have to check it out. I haven't heard that song before.
I'll send you the link.
Okay. And then you mentioned personal development. That's a passion of yours. And maybe this fits in with books or podcasts. Like, do you have any books or podcasts you would recommend to our listeners? Something maybe you've recently listened to or read that was extra special for you?
I've had a lot going on this year, so I honestly haven't really read many books. I'm kind of halfway through Bethany Frankel's Business is Personal,
Wow.
but I haven't finished that, so I probably wouldn't talk about that one yet. I think if I'm going to recommend anything, I would recommend a number of books by Lisa Messenger. And I know she's an Australian entrepreneur, and she's just launching into the US right now, actually. So she's been doing a ton of like book fairs and things over there. But she wrote Risk and Resilience, another one called Daring and Disruptive, and another one called Purpose. And I read each of those books in one day, cover to cover. They were incredible. It just something about the way in which she writes just really connects, and she's really raw and honest, and she'll take you on the journey of her entrepreneurship or whatever she's talking about in the book. And it's just so real, and you can just relate to that. So yeah, the three of her, she's got many books, but those three in particular were really resonated with me. So I would recommend them for sure to anybody, and it doesn't matter what stage in business you're at, you will resonate with something in the book.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I haven't read those, and I need to. Even the Bethany Frankel, I have it on my list, but I haven't started it yet. So that's,
it's pretty good. There's always golden nuggets in everything, right?
Yeah,
to
right.
pick down. I wouldn't say it's completely groundbreaking, but there are things where I'm like, oh, that's good. So if you take a couple of nuggets from each book, I think they're worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. I have so many highlights from books I read.
Right.
Well, I can't, the time has flown by so fast, and I just want to say I appreciate you being on the podcast, and I really enjoy your high energy and enthusiasm, and I hope it comes through to the audience listening. And if it's okay, if you're okay with the audience reaching out to you for any reason, could you provide what would be the best way to kind of contact you with questions they might have, or just to talk?
Absolutely. So Instagram, I'm probably on most. So that's Melissa Park Events. LinkedIn, I'm there as well, Melissa Park. Don't hesitate to reach out directly via email. So that's melissa@melissapark.co. I'm on Facebook as well, but honestly, not much. So you're better off to reach me via LinkedIn, Instagram, or just, shoot me an email. I, love building my network, meeting new people. So yeah, don't hesitate. If there's, any questions coming out of this podcast, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, amazing. Well, again, thank you. I appreciate you being on, and I hope you enjoy. Is it evening or morning there for you?
Morning. Yeah,
morning.
We're just starting. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, I hope you enjoy your day. And thank you again for coming on. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Michelle again. Just one more thing before you take off. If you've enjoyed this podcast, consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Bosstrack, or sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It's easy to sign up and easy to cancel. Every Monday, we send out a short, exclusive newsletter of what we found during the week that we're excited about, we're inspired by, and we're watching and reading. If you'd like to check it out, just to go to thebosstrack.com/newsletter. Just type that into your browser, thebosstrack.com/newsletter. Drop in your email and you'll get the very next one. Thanks for listening.